Welcome back, everyone, to Amplifying the Arts, the Amp Up Arts monthly webinar. I'm Ashley Lucier, the Executive Director of Amp Up Arts, and today we are super excited to have Sharrell Edmond with us. She is a school administrator, theater director, all things arts and advocate at Foley High School, so in Baldwin County. But do you live in Baldwin County, or are you in Mobile?
I still stay in Mobile. I'm just commuting, okay. So I get the best of both worlds.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, you're in a great school for the arts, a great area for the arts. We love our Mobile collaborative site. They are very close to my heart, and we're excited to have you on today.
Well, I'm excited to be here. I can't wait to get into the conversation.
Awesome. Yeah. So, just kind of before we start talking about like your specifics as a school administrator, because you do a lot more than just kind of the school educator side of it, right? But someone said they can't hear anything. I'll check on that volume in a minute. But can you share your journey, both as an artist and then also as an educator, and kind of how those two paths came together for you?
Okay, so I've always been artistic. That's kind of something that nature and God kind of gave to me, so I just went with it. And so when I went to college, I ended up getting a BA in theater from Auburn University. I lucked into that because I just kept auditioning for shows, and eventually the department chair said, we can't continue to give you parts and shows if you are not a part. Oh, they cannot hear.
Yeah, that's what I was like. I don't know why people can't hear. I was trying to figure it out. I'm sorry. Give me just a second. It looks like we are having some.
Okay.
Oh, okay. We do have some that can hear.
Is it a place?
I am not sure, because I can hear everything on my end. Let's see. Audio settings. Oh, I might. Maybe I would say double check and make sure. Just make sure that your speakers are not on mute, because it looks like a couple of people can hear and some can't. Oh, let's see. Oh, everyone else can hear is fine. Yeah, double check, and also it may help to leave and then come back in, and maybe you might be able to hear it. I'm not sure. We've never encountered that issue before, so. I definitely like completely cut out one time. I lost my internet right in the middle of the very first webinar we had. But never just had like not being able to hear anything. So yeah, if you need to kind of jump off and jump back in, I can let people in as they come back on and see if that works. Sorry about that. Okay, sorry, Sharrell.
No, it's good. I want everybody to be able to hear. But no, I kind of started off my pathway in education a little differently. I went the alternative route because I got 2 degrees from Auburn, one in Spanish and one in theater. And so I ended up getting in on the ABC route, and I taught Spanish, and then I flipped to theater, and then I flipped back to Spanish. So I kind of went in between those two, all the while continuing my work in theater in the community of Mobile, and just a whole bunch of things there, starting off with acting, and then from acting, it led into directing and acting at the same time. So I had a fun little journey here so far. And so this year I stepped into the admin role, kind of getting outside the classroom.
Awesome. So kind of, you talked about being in theater, and actually too, Spanish. That's really cool. I went all the way up through AP Spanish because my school forced me to, and yeah, I can't speak any of it. So
I'm sure you would do okay, though. I'm sure you would do okay.
I don't, I forgot quite a bit of it. But your background in theater, I mean, people talk a lot about kind of like the soft skills of art and what they bring to other positions that you wouldn't normally think of, and then kind of how they impact like other career choices that aren't like always as obvious, as some of the other kind of skills that we learn in more typical core classes. But how has that background in theater kind of influenced your leadership style in terms of working as a school administrator?
So I think one of the main things with theater and the arts is it gives you this ability to know how to flow through spaces. So it allows me to be adaptable to change and to learn how to pivot. So I think one of my strongest suits is always being able to go into a space and being able to communicate with others, like whether it's on math, science, or fine arts. There's a relatability that you have to have as an artist that kind of transcends through all things.
Yeah, yeah. Theater is definitely more one for the social aspects of it. For sure, for sure. And I was also formerly a school administrator, and I know the amount of time that it takes, especially starting in and just the workload that you have. But kind of a lot of people when they're in those types of leadership positions find difficulty kind of balancing their artistic practice, or they might drop off. I remember when I started working at schools, I paint, and I stopped painting for almost a decade when I was in the school system. But you've continued on. You're still really heavily involved in the theater community in Mobile, correct?
I am.
And kind of what has inspired you to stay connected to that? Does it motivate you in your career at Foley High School, or does it keep you sane? What is it?
I would have to say that the arts is something that I'm passionate about. So regardless of if I was working here or in Texas, I would still find a way to be really involved in the arts. I like the kinship of it. I like the fellowship of it. But I also use the arts to kind of tell different stories and things that I would like to see. And so I found sometimes that there's pockets of spaces where all stories aren't being told. And so instead of me waiting on people to tell those stories, I kind of just put myself in that driver's seat in order to tell those stories. So I kind of knew what I wanted to direct, but then when it came time to find the talent, and you go through the whole audition process, we were just short some people. So then it turned into like, okay, I'm gonna have to act and direct and do all of the things. But we have plenty of people that do that. So like Tyler Perry does it all the time, Spike Lee does it all the time. So I just had to
Yeah.
on thing for a second.
And you kind of touched on something that we wanted to focus on today, was like being that voice, advocating, right? Because I mean that is a way to advocate, and a lot of times we kind of think of advocacy as something more of what I kind of do in my role, like going to the State House and talking to legislators, and if you can't do that, then you can't, you're not going to really make a change. But there's a lot of ways that we can advocate directly in the communities that we're in, directly in the jobs that we're in, especially if we have a lot of passion for it, like you do. So, from your perspective as an administrator, what do you feel like are effective ways to be able to be that voice? Sorry, I get really distracted by the chat. But to be that voice to advocate for art, in your school or in your district, your community.
So what I've found is that when you take on the role as an administrator, your focus strictly becomes kind of how can I be supportive to my students and how can I be supportive to my staff? And so it allows me to kind of switch my gears. So as an educator, You're in there trying to find creative ways and allow students to fall in love with the art form. As an administrator, it's like, how do I support you guys so you guys have the opportunities to do this art form? And so it doesn't just stop with the students. I also want to be supportive to my staff who come up with these great ideas and who have all these opportunities that they find. And we have to say, okay, is this actually doable for us at this level? And so in the admin role, you're trying to make everyone happy while also keeping the bigger picture at the forefront with kind of the logistic side of things. So that advocacy piece for me is really, like I said, finding that balance between supporting my students in their dreams, but also supporting the staff to get them to those dreams as well.
Yeah, it's almost more like like an empowerment position for you. I mean, empowering teachers to be able to kind of get the things done that they want to do for their students. And we do have a question in the chat. At your current school, how do you keep involved in their arts programs?
Okay, that's actually a good one. So my school has multiple assistant principals, and so my role, my department has been fine arts since that's my background, and so me keeping up with them honestly has not been tough because they're my group to keep up with, but it allowed me to kind of get into all the fortes of things. So the art department, as far as painting and drawing, we have a superintendent's kind of soiree at the end of the year. So I went to that with them to kind of represent the school with them. We had a student that was one of the superintendent's picks, so that was a good thing. Again, like I was saying earlier with you one-on-one, my crew does a good job in collaborating. So of course, I see the band at all of the football games. I see the band at all of our assemblies. And we've also had some good opportunities to have like our choir kind of get incorporated with that as well, with like singing different stuff. So no, I always get a good opportunity to kind of incorporate myself more with our fine arts.
Yeah, and they asked too, I guess, and you kind of answered this, like, are you the point of contact or the director for the programs in your schools? So you deal with all those logistics.
Right. And so even when it comes to writing grants, we do a lot of PLCs here. And so I'll sit in on the fine arts meeting and kind of see, okay, where do you guys think the funding should go? These are ideas that I think if we push this forward, we will get a yay. These are ideas that I think, okay, let's ask for this in a different way so that we can now propose it and people can see the complete benefit of it. On the artistic side, we get lofty goals and everything is important. But like I said, as admin, it's my job to kind of reel that in and bring them into things that can be practical and kind of, meld both worlds of education and arts.
Yeah, yeah. So what kind of what kind of conversations, because like you said, you have multiple APs there. Foley is a large high school, correct? About how many students do y'all have there?
1,700. We float between 16 and 1,700.
Yeah, yeah. Y'all are a large high school. You have multiple APs. I'm assuming probably different curriculum specialists, instructional specialists that are all
curriculum specialists. Each of us has like a grade level that we're responsible for as well. We each get a grade level. We each get content areas. We each get just another faction that kind of holds the school together. So I may be over cafeteria, someone else may be over bus and transportation. So we all hold a lot of hats around here.
Yeah, a lot of competing interests.
Yeah.
A lot of competing interests. So, with arts, we really sometimes feel like we have to or I feel like kind of we have to overly defend like our position. We have to find creative ways to show people that we're tied to workforce development, to show that we are as valuable as STEM or, whatever else the school is focusing on. So kind of what conversations have you had with your other school leaders or your district officials, central office, staff, supers, about the values of the arts, and kind of what approaches do you feel like work best in those situations with all those competing interests going on?
Yeah, the biggest thing that I find helps when you encroach on the subject of arts and people who may not be arts oriented is finding the way to tie it into other things that people may be interested in. So at the high school level, of course, everything is academic based. And so for me, being able to tie in the ways that the arts can kind of be cross curriculum based and we can kind of help with those reading scores that are low if they're in theater. Theater is a lot of reading, you're going through plays. So it's kind of attaching it to that that makes it seem a little approachable from those other people when I'm trying to sell them on how this is important. Of course, there's a lot of data studies that show that people that tend to graduate with liberal arts degrees are very well-rounded employees. They're very well-rounded people in general. And so it's always a plus if we can get our kids to be involved in the arts. Here, particularly at our school, one of our main missions and vision is to keep every student involved in something, some type of club, some type of sport, because we find that children who are involved in things at school tend to stay in school. And
Mhm.
so a lot of times when I'm leading these conversations is really creating that platform to kind of emphasize that these arts programs do offer a lot of spaces for our children to get involved in more ways than one.
Yeah, yeah. And what kind of what would you suggest to teachers and teaching artists, to kind of better align their messaging or their advocacy? Because it is a little bit of a different role. Like you said, yours is much more administrative, and
Mhm.
you may have the ear of, certain people that your teachers may not have, but your teachers may have sometimes closer relationships with parents or other people in the community. So kind of what would you say, to them on how they could kind of align what you're saying with what they're able to do in terms of advocacy in their role?
Right. So I would say, even using my experience as a teacher, a lot of the work that I did, I tried to tie it to something that was educational based. So, yes, I love directing. Yes, I love telling stories of marginalized people from different socioeconomic backgrounds. But how does that tie into like high schoolers and what they're doing? And so I would always find pieces that could be like, okay, this is talking about the Voting Rights Act. Okay, this piece is talking about Anne Frank and Emmett Till. Great, these are two historical figures in time. So now I can tie in how this relates to US history. And so as an educator, your main focus is always bringing the students something that is going to help them develop and grow as citizens of the world, but of the US. And so we have to find things that tie back into curriculum at some point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, Sorry, I lost my train of thought completely. I
No,
was,
I see
I
you
was,
juggling things. I see your screen like lighting up or not lighting up.
I
So
am, I am, and I get very distracted very easily. So I'd like one thing and I'm like, oh gosh. But yeah, I mean, I think kind of like you said, really tying it into other things that they have to do, or that the school focuses on, is really important. And actually too, we just did get a really good question in the chat about this, because a lot of what we were talking about is like we're tying it into things that are required. So Amanda in the chat asked, are there any art requirements that students must meet to graduate? So I'm going to let you answer that, Sharrell. I know the answer. I will let you answer that.
So right now, especially in the state of Alabama, our focus is very much college and career readiness, even with more focus on this whole career readiness part. And so my school has some very passionate band directors that are working really hard to get us a CCR. So the best way I can explain it is in high school now, essentially each of these schools almost have their own little pathways or majors that children can take. So children are required to take 3 course sequences of something they come out with and kind of make work. So if it was healthcare, it would be foundations of health. Then it would be like human anatomy and body structures. And then the third class would be where they actually did practicum of going to like a nursing home. And so we're trying to work out that part on the fine arts end. So a child could select the fine arts. Um, band always can float for like a PE credit. So, and
Mm-hmm.
that will kind of be required. But yeah, we're working out those intricacies to figure out how do we make this like a clear pathway to where kids can be like, I took music production 1, now I'm in
Yeah.
music technology and sound engineering 2. So when they leave, now this is a viable sound engineering type
Yeah.
CCR. So
And when you're talking about CCR, just because, education world, we have a lot of acronyms.
yes, yes,
So do you want to kind of explain that? And I think are you kind of referring to the new graduate like requirements that they can
yes,
have? Do you want to
yes.
talk like just for a second about kind of what that is and what that means for the
Yes. So
arts?
essentially, when every child graduates, of course, they have to have a certain amount of credits to graduate, which is your core classes that you take every year. You're going to have a math, science, English, history, and you throw in some electives, some required electives of course, like I said, a PE, health, band can kind of float in there. And so from there, when I speak of these other classes, like I said, it's literally setting children up for like what you would do in college, in that they have to have 3 course sequences of this, and they must pass those classes with a certain grade in order to receive credit of saying that they are, I won't say certified, but sometimes they can be certified in those
Yeah.
areas for those opportunities. And so some of them go on and they are ready to kind of go into the workforce. I said
Mhm.
that's our focus right now, is really pushing people into the workforce currently.
Yes, yeah, that's been a priority of the state for probably about the last two terms, governor's terms. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops, in the further years as we get new leadership. Um, and also a lot of different new policies are coming out. Like you said, the way that they can graduate now, there are other steps that they can take that,
Right.
like you said, you can kind of think about creatively ways to be able to qualify for a diploma. Because
Mhm.
outside of what your school is doing, which is amazing, and it's awesome that you guys have that opportunity to do that, there is actually no requirement in Alabama to take any arts at all at any grade level to graduate. So you
And
could have
funding
a
is
kid.
very different for the arts as well.
Yeah.
Like if you have Title I funding, that can go towards English, that can go towards SPED, which is short for special education. But when it comes to the arts, even though they may need funding, it just does not fall into some of those parameters.
Mhm.
So whereas we may have money to float this way, we now have to change our focus and say, okay, let's get creative when we're trying to figure out funding when it comes to the arts.
Yeah, yeah. And a kid could go K through 12, a student could go K through 12 and never have an art class at all.
Mhm.
I
And they
think
just
we had a graduate requirement, like it was like over a decade ago, and they removed it and made it an option. But yeah, that's definitely not something that the state requires us to have anymore. Um, but yeah, we've got a couple other questions coming in. Let me go back and make sure I don't want to miss anyone's questions.
okay.
Um, and some of these I'm going to circle back to because some of these we were going to talk about anyway. But I do want to. Well, we'll go ahead and talk about this one because this is kind of something that I wanted to touch on with you. You talked about a lot about the academic connections, but building a positive school culture and climate too. I mean, we always talk about like if a student doesn't come to school ready to learn,
Mhm,
emotionally, mentally, it doesn't matter what academic interventions you put in place, it's just not going to stick with them.
mhm.
So how can you use arts to kind of build that positive school culture, to support the growth of students beyond academics so they are ready to come in, and ready to learn?
So what I have found is that the arts really help our kids kind of get their emotions in check. So I've had some students that teachers may write up all the time, but they find their passion in either color guard or the band, and they are committed. And that's what you look for as an admin or as a teacher. You always want to see the good in your students and find that thing that actually like connects them to the better world. And so for me, the arts offer an opportunity for kids that people may tend to write off, to really shine, and to give them an outlet. I have a student right now. She is known throughout the school, but she gives her all to color guard. So much so that she has like a full-time job to make sure she pays for color guard. And those are the stories that I wish more people heard. When we say that no, the arts are important and the students really do want the arts as long as they're offered. And that's that funding part that gets tricky, because when the state looks at certain things, band and art and the electives tend to be the first place that they go to kind of cut our funding. And I don't think
Yeah.
people get the bigger scope of how expensive it is to make that stuff work.
Yeah, yeah. And something that I just happen to know particularly, I know I cannot remember his name right now, but he is over your guitar classes, I
Dr.
think.
Roy?
Yes, I think so. We were on a textbook committee together
I'm
one
sure
time.
that's who you're talking about, Dr. Roy.
So something that I thought was really interesting for what he was talking about was that a way to kind of build that positive school culture. We think about like students need to be able to see themselves in that school community, right? And I know that one of the things that you guys do. So first, yeah, we talked about. I just said the guitar. So you guys have like a rock band, right? Kind of like a rock group.
We have quite a few things actually. So they
And a
have done
mariachi band, like
Boys would be our rock band that's consisted of like some students here. And then we have, you can say mariachi, but we have a band called Los Amigos. And so, for instance, for Christmas, we wanted to incorporate how diverse our school is, because we have a high Spanish
you have a
speaking
high
population.
you have a high Yale population.
Yeah, and so they were like, "Oh, Miss Edmond, you speak Spanish, so we're gonna do Feliz Navidad, and like you're gonna sing it, and Los Amigos is gonna play it." And so that was a good time. So I think Dr. Roy is correct in saying that if we present the opportunities for students to be able to see themselves reflected throughout all these activities, it can only create like a positive outcome and increase student engagement, and that's what we always want.
Yeah, yeah. And I wanted to go back to some questions in the chat because I thought this kind of went really well with what we were talking about. So not only kind of that school culture, but one of the questions was, how do you envision the integration of arts education shifting as culture and society move towards being more technology based? So again, recognizing students where they are. They are a tech generation. So how do you see that kind of going in with the integration of arts education?
You know what? I think the teachers here are already doing like a really good job with incorporating technology. So for instance, the art teachers, when you're trying to teach how to draw or paint, she already has like a webcam that records her, that like screencast her from the smart board. So they're watching her as if like this is old school, like she's painting. When it comes to music, we already kind of have like a music production class. Like it's a whole studio set up on campus to where like the kids can go in there and work on beats and record and really work on the technical aspects of this is how we create a song. And so moving forward, if we already have that stuff now, I just see us even growing upon that. So the studio that we have now, that's a classroom, it'll become like the immersive experience, with multiple headphones, multiple soundboards, so kids can kind of create beats and so forth. Like I see it.
Do they do like some digital music production already, or y'all have
Oh
a?
yeah, we have a whole little board in there. And the teacher over, his name is O'Kane, and he was like, "Miss Edmond, I heard you sing. Like, you need to come in the studio and drop some vocals." I was like, "We'll see about that." But the kids have a really good time with it, honestly. And that's what I will say I like about here. There's no limit. If our kids are interested in it, we pretty much try to find a way to kind of get it going. So like Los Amigos, they kind of go off and do their own gigs outside of the school. Like they are their own band outside of Howard High School.
I know I kept telling Dr. Roy they need to perform at the international,
Mhm.
oh gosh, what is it called? In Mobile, the
Yeah,
international
the
festival.
festival.
Yeah, they need to go out there and do that. Or do an art walk on Friday
Yes,
or something.
yes.
That would be incredible. We can get them out there. um, and you kind of talked about, you talked about a student, that's in color guard. Do you have other students that, you feel like they were deeply impacted by arts in your school, or maybe it was a former student that you had, but just any other stories that you want to share about a student that was really deeply impacted
Well,
by the.
we had a senior graduate. So the student I told you that won the superintendent's award, she
Yeah.
does art. So that one she won, that was a painting that she did that the superintendent of our district liked. But she's also like really involved in the band. Like I think she was in the noise and all. So she really was like intermingled through all of the arts kind of. And she walked away with like a lot of scholarship money when we did our senior night. Another senior, he was a student that just was really open. And so last year, at the last minute, he hopped into a role in one of our plays and learned the whole show in like a week. Now, mind you, they gave him like a little, cheat code to get through the show because he hopped in at the last minute. But from him doing that show, he auditioned this year and he was the lead in The Music Man. And so now he's like going full throttle on this acting thing. And so he's going to
Yeah.
school to theater in acting. So they definitely are making the investment now in high school and they're continuing on as they go to higher ed. And that's a good sign.
Yeah, that's always a great sign. Before we kind of go past the advocacy part, we did have a couple of questions about advocacy. So we have one that what has been your biggest struggle being a supporter of the arts in general? And then, well, I'll let you go ahead and answer that one first. So your biggest struggle is being a supporter of arts in general.
Um, I think my biggest struggle has been advocating for equitable experiences in connection to the stories that are told, to the opportunities that are presented for the stories to be told, um, and just overall fairness when it comes to that. So a lot of the work that I was doing in the community was really for um, me to push that envelope and saying, hey, here is a social issue and this is how the arts can attack that. I think a lot of people during COVID, like, yes, we love the arts because it's entertaining, but throughout history, whether it be through poetry, whether it be through paintings, whether it be through song, or whether it be through film and theater, art has been used to kind of make those hard conversations through social commentary in those art forms. So my biggest thing has been that is pushing through and making those tough conversations entertaining, while also allowing people to have the space to kind of discuss a thing that maybe they thought, but now the show has given them the platform to speak on it more. If that
Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah.
No, it does. And I was thinking, so the schools that you've been at
Mhm.
prior to Foley,
Mhm.
did they have that same amount of access to the arts? Or I don't know where you were before. So I'm
Okay.
like just totally like I don't
So
know
this
if
is
I'm
all a learning experience. That's good. So the school that I was at before I became the theater teacher there, they had not had theater in like years, if really at all. And so I was kind of green-eyed and was like, yes, we're gonna go in here and we're gonna do all the things. We had no money, we had no textbooks. It was a lot of just I hate to say freestyling it, but like really just kind of going for what you know and trying to push. So, you hear me mention funding a lot.
Yeah.
And funding is a big part of this. So you want your children to compete in state competitions. You want your students to do Trumbauer, where it costs money to send a kid. You have to pay to register the kid. You have to pay to get the kid to the competition. And so it was a matter of creating a climate in which the students could understand that, okay, I have paid money for you to compete. I just need you to compete, because if not, we've wasted money even registering you
Mm-hmm.
um, for this event. So there were challenges in that way in trying to create an environment that was inclusive of all art forms. I think band is one of the easier universal art forms to get people to buy into. But then it gets a little tricky when you go to kind of Title I or high poverty, low income schools,
Yeah.
and you're throwing out something that seems kind of um, lofty, like theater, or you want them to get into graphic design or drawing. It's just, it was really working on exposing children to a lot of different things. And so that's how I could find stories like, okay, the children aren't learning about Anne Frank as much anymore. Okay, well, Emmett Till is important to this demographic. They should know about this historical figure.
Mhm.
And we found a play that incorporates both. We found a play that I can kind of work with this group in Mobile and this group with Mobile. So it was really a good opportunity for me to do that because I got to work with schools. I got to work with Boys and Girls Club. I got to work with Youth Federation and People United to Advance the Dream, which was for like MLK.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say is kind of finding the pieces that um, despite the demographic that they'll be able to get something from. And so, in working in that demographic, it taught me how to write a grant. So that was a great learning experience. I learned how to ask for money, which nobody likes doing, but
Yeah.
I had to really navigate that.
But it does take away, and I mean, I don't want to be
I
what are
know
they
I'm
called?
giving very much of a journey
Downer
right
Debbie right now, but
now.
I mean, even having even something as simple as like that's a great skill to have, but even having to learn it takes away from the equitability that
Mhm.
you have as a school because versus a school that just has that money and has that funding and their teachers can go and do, what they need to do. They have the time. And if you're
Right.
in a school that doesn't, you can't advocate. It's much more difficult for you to do kind of those even extra things as a teacher in the arts because you're bogged down with grant paperwork, you're bogged down with trying to find funding. You can't like 100% focus on always celebrating your students or like thinking super creatively because you just don't have, I mean, nobody has that capacity to do all that, right? So until that kind of gets, it's like they're almost like a band-aid, right? I mean, they're enough to kind of hold you over to make it seem like, well, yeah, that school's also getting theater too, but is the quality the same? Does the teacher have the same capacity to support her students as she would, in a school that has very well-funded arts? Like you said, so much of that goes back to funding because when we
Mhm.
have the money, it frees up our time, and our time
Exactly.
is so important, especially in terms of advocating and supporting students. I mean, we hear that again and again. Like, I don't have time to advocate for my students because I'm trying to find money for them to do anything at all.
Right.
um, so I was just curious. The whole reason I kind of asked that is just to see that difference that you saw in between, schools
Mhm.
that because we
Oh,
typically work, yeah, I mean, our organization typically works with Title I schools that have,
absolutely.
little to no arts access. So we see the struggles a lot with those schools and, even saying, well, yeah, like we can get this program in here, it's not the same. I mean, it's a great experience for the students, but it's not the same. And
Mhm.
there's always this tension of like, it's probably going to be taken away next year. So it's hard for us to really like hold on to it and be confident in its value because it seems like a very temporary thing versus a school that's very well funded and has what they
Mhm.
need, consistently had what they needed. Um,
Mhm.
But sorry, I'm gonna get on my soapbox about it.
No, but it's good that you have that experience. So that's why it's not like I'm saying things that like you haven't experienced. Like, okay, it's great that we can introduce these kids to a thing, but then how do we continuously keep them incorporated into this art form? So like at my old school, we had children that could sing like Jennifer Hudson down to like, I don't know, Carrie Underwood, but did they have the same opportunity to be in a band like The Noise, to be in a band? Not really. You know, all of us who were arts educators there, we were really trying to find funding and find opportunities to kind of like make it creative and get them to be on the playing field. So when you think about things like Trumbauer, that was like a requirement as a teacher. And it's like, well, how can we be required to do Trumbauer and it's not even free? Trumbauer is not free.
Yeah. It's
So, you know,
expensive. It's usually in North Alabama. It's
yeah,
like, I
all
mean,
of the things.
transportation alone is like, a
Exactly.
huge issue. So, yeah, and I think someone put it in the comment, like our society likes to tie concrete value to a skill, and
Mhm.
that they think that comes into play in getting support and resources. STEM is easy because you have that ROI, right? I mean,
Mhm.
even when I talk to legislators, they ask that, like, well, what is this going to give us? And it's like, well,
Right.
I
Right.
can't show you a test score. I can't say like, well, on the ACAP or the ACT, they passed,
Mhm.
you know, um, they passed this score and they're proficient.
Right.
But yeah, they were saying, you have to open people's eyes as to how the arts are valuable, and that is really hard to, sometimes persuade people that don't have an experience in art that sometimes art is just good for art's sake, and it's good for people, and it just, it keeps us sane to an extent.
Also, into that whole technology piece, a big concern for a lot of artists now is AI. So, if
Mhm.
I am a painter and now you can give AI, your thoughts and it creates an artwork or it can replicate an artwork that I spent hours doing. Where's my value at as a painter, or even vice versa? You have people like Michael B. Jordan or, Charlize
Mhm.
Theron. Will movie industry just decide to like take their images with the technology that we have now and say, okay, I'm gonna feed it to chat GTP? Like that's the thing that it's like we have to find, like someone putting their human beings, we have to find the humanity in the things that we're doing. And some of that stuff I don't think that you can kind of replicate. And so I think the closer we stay connected to there's nothing that can replace like doing a show with people and bonding with people that way. There's nothing like going through learning a dance routine with a group of people, or
Mhm.
even with those children are together a whole lot. And for some of
Yeah,
those kids, that's as much connection as they're going to get. And so
it's
you got
family. Yeah.
to keep those interpersonal connections going.
Yeah, I read something. It was a visual artist. I read something online, I don't know, maybe a week or two ago, and he was saying that like he was in this interview with someone, and they were like, "Well, why don't you just use AI now? Like you have AI, like why don't you just use that? It would be so much easier." And he was saying that's not the point. Because for artists and anyone that's experienced art, yes, I mean, the outcome is great, to celebrate a production, to celebrate a piece being finished, or like if you're a visual artist, you don't really think pieces are ever finished. But, he was saying that it's the process of creating. And I think that that's like when we talk about even, what is that return? What is that return of investment for arts? It's having students go through a challenging process sometimes, and he was like, I enjoy that process, like I want that work. I'm not doing this just to like have a piece done. It's the process of it that I learn the most from, that I appreciate the most. And we think about, so often when they talk about like critical thinking skills that students are lacking now, it's like, oh well, they can't think through this assignment, they don't know what to do. It's like, because they're missing processes with that technology. They're getting everything automatically, and they're not going through a process. And a lot of times when they talk about, like, I always used to think when I taught English, I was not an arts teacher, but whenever I was in professional development, and we talked a lot about, I was teaching when like PBL, like project-based learning, came up, you know, a lot of different things like that. And in that process, like I just kept thinking, like, this is like the artistic process. Like, that's what we're teaching. We're teaching them the artistic process. That's all you're doing when you're doing these project-based learning, is you're letting them think about those different processes. When you're thinking about even you know, a math proof or something like that, like, it's a process that you have to work through. But anyway, I think that's really interesting to kind of.
I think it's all important, because I think what you're leading into, because they have such access to technology, in a way, it takes away that creativity or their ability to like imagine. So as a theater teacher, I found a lot of success whenever I would be like, okay, we're just going to improv it. I'm going to give y'all a thing, go for what you know, because then it allowed them to create. The people that wanted to be bossy got to be the directors. The people that naturally like just had a flair for being extra got to act. And so I think in us continuing pushing for the arts, it allows for us to keep a society that's open to imagining. I think we're kind of steering away from that, but imagination is a big part of creativity and, like, you know, innovation.
Yeah, yeah. We have some really good, I'm so excited about all the people that are very engaged in this webinar. We have another guest on that's saying, you know, creativity is all about problem solving and seeing how the students make something original, you know, within the parameters of the given assignment. And that's really what we want them to do. We talk about innovation, even in the workforce development. We don't, you know, if you're only teaching them STEM, you're just teaching them to work on a factory line. You're not teaching them innovation. They're not learning creativity in, you know, memorizing a math formula. So I think that's, you know, really good to talk about how kind of that crossover, you know, is there all the time, whether people want it to be or not, that are not in the arts. It's there, and it's really hard to avoid. And I did want to talk about some kind of your strategies that you used in the past, you know, as an educator, as an administrator, to engage students in the arts. Because, you know, we like you said, like, artists, we love art. Everything is like a priority in art. Like, everything's super important and needed. Not everybody agrees with that. There are students that, you know, just like aren't super. I had two boys, one very artistic, one wants to be on a soccer field all day, right? Okay. So, you know, how do you engage students in the arts when it's something that they don't want, you know, maybe don't think that they want to try, or they're not really engaged, they don't want to really be engaged in it. But, you know, kind of thinking like, we don't expect every student that goes to an art class to be an artist, right? But we want them to get something out of it. So, kind of, what were some of your favorite strategies for engaging students in the arts, especially if they were like new to it or a little kind of apathetic about it?
So whenever you're in the arts, the children expect you to be the expert. I mean, children expect teachers to be the expert in general. And so they would always get like a hoot out of me being like the performer in the stuff. So if they knew that like I was going to be in it, they were like, oh no, we want to go to the show. We have to go to the show because we want to see our teacher actually do what it is that she's telling us that she does on a daily. So they like that aspect of it. And like I kind of threw out earlier,
they were
I always try different things.
Believe you.
Right. I always try different things. So when you have theater, it lends itself to a couple of things. We may read a play. Okay, we may not have strong readers here. Let's go to improv. Okay, let's visually compare two contrasting actors doing the same thing and see how you guys like seeing Denzel Washington do something versus seeing how another actor does something. Like I said, finding those roles. So even though I do extroverted things at my core, I feel like I'm kind of introvert until I feel people out. And so I kind of use that same thing in the classroom. I would always try to see like, okay, no, this kid may not be an actor, but they maybe can like do good at set. So like they would flourish when we would go to the stage and I'm like, okay, you're on curtain, you're stage manager, or you're like the assistant. Like there are children that like genuinely just like that role. And
Yeah.
that worked for me
Yeah.
because again, we didn't have any money. We didn't have any, I didn't have an assistant. So yes, I welcomed any child that took on the role of being like, they wanted to be an assistant to any little production that we were doing. So I found that those type of things really helped me out in the classroom to kind of get them involved for sure.
Fit with the job that they kind of felt like they liked the most. You think about
Yeah.
like in elementary school when they had like the different jobs every week, you
Mm-hmm.
know, for the students, and it's like, which one are you gonna hate and which one are you gonna love? But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that is great. With theater though, it has so many different kind of aspects of that. And then you talked about, you know, that kind of lack of resources, um, the time constraints. So how did you manage some of those things? What were some things that you were able to kind of accomplish or get done
So
before?
I will say, at my old school, we did have a lot of opportunities to kind of like throw out, hey, this is what I think for a fundraiser. So like we did a talent show one time and we charged the kids like $1 to the talent show. Well, that school had about 1,200 or so kids. If the auditorium could fit about, you know, 8 to 7-ish, okay, boom, that was easy like $700-800 that we got just from doing
Yeah,
a talent show. That was relatively like no cost to us.
yeah.
And then later on, like I said, when I was doing the show and I was performing, and I said, okay, I want the kids to go, but I don't want children who come from a certain socioeconomic background to not be able to go to the show. So like most of the schools in Mobile County do kind of, they are kind of already labeled Title One. So pretty much all of them
Yeah.
can get funding. And I think being on the teacher side, so for people that are not in education, when you do a field trip, you have to cover the subs, you have to cover the bus, and you have to cover the cost of whatever the trip is. And so I said, okay, even if I know the theater will not care about tickets, I still got to get them there and I still got to pay for the chaperones. And so reached out to like a county commissioner in Mobile. I said, hi, like I'm doing a play. I would like to, pay for these 2 school shows. And then she was like, okay, so I mean, how much are you asking for? Like, give me some numbers.
Mhm.
And Commissioner Lovegood, she's an
Yeah.
awesome person, amazing person. She's very chill. She does not
She
boast
supports
about,
our site in Mobile.
yes, she does not boast about the work that she does, but she is super a champion for the arts. And so I literally got back with the board of the theater company I was on, and I said, hey, how many seats do we have in there? Okay. And I sent about 11 schools. I even sent um, children from the district of the play. So the play that was G's Bend, and that was about like these women quilters of Alabama. So they district came to the show, and I said, okay. But we paid for all of it. And so really, I will say, I like running at all ends sometimes? Absolutely, because like I said, I was in the play, I was teaching, and I was coordinating all these different things. Um, but like I said, my students were super duper proud to be like, oh my goodness, we got off campus, we got to see our teacher, we got to eat lunch at Foosackly's or Chick-fil-A. So overall, it was a good win for them. And then for me, it allowed me to see, okay, a lot of times people make grant writing seem intimidating or like you just don't get success with it. And it could just be the luck of the draw for me. But like, no, I asked the universe and it aligned it to where, because I didn't want anything for me. Like that, I find that if you are doing some things for children, people tend to be
Yeah.
open to it, whether it's with time, resources, or funding.
Yeah.
Um, that's a good segue for you to get some things funded.
Yeah. And this is, I hope I don't throw you off with this because this is relatively new news. I mean, it just passed a couple weeks ago, but the state passed the RAISE Act, which is giving basically schools, you get your foundation program funds. So you get that base for students based on your ADM, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now they're adding weights for each student based on like certain situations. So if you have a student that is low income, so basically if they qualify for free or reduced lunch, if you have a student that's an EL student, determined by like their WIDA scores or something like that. They're doing poverty, low EL, gifted students. Harder. So that wouldn't apply to y'all, and then special needs. And special needs actually has 3 different tiers. But what they're doing with those funds is basically like if you're a low income student, you get an extra 20% of the foundation program amount for that student added on. And those weights are stackable. So if you have, a gifted EL student in a charter school, that's 3 additional weights that school is getting for their students.
That's awesome.
So that's starting in the fall, and we were part of kind of that advocacy group, that really worked to get that passed, and the schools are getting that extra money in the fall. But I say all this to say that this money has to be tied to the growth of those specific groups of students. So, the districts have to report on like, this is how we're using the funds to help these specific students. Mm-hmm. So off the top of your head, because I did not tell you any of this before you came on.
Now I don't know anything. I'm so surprised. I'll engage in conversation now.
How do you think that you could use that as a way to advocate for arts for those students? Because like I said, the districts are going to actually have to report on how they're using these funds to help those specific groups. So I was thinking kind of like, what arts can specifically do for students that are in low income situations, what it can do for students that are in EL situations, and how we can kind of help districts understand that, if you spend some of these funds on arts, it can help those groups, in XYZ ways.
Right. Well, I was gonna say, being that you're already familiar with Dr. Roy, he's already like, even when we have our meetings, he's already looked at like, these are all the children that are in band. These are all the children that are in band and AP. Like the majority of our AP kids are also involved in band. And so he's like, no, our children are academically holding the school in a great spot. And so he already like collects great data on that front. I think for me, coming from an admin side, like I said, because we do have a high ELL population, I'm always proud whenever those parents have an opportunity to come in and see their kids participate in things like other kids. And you don't like to think that things are like separate, but there's a language barrier there. So whereas we may be doing phone cast calls and sending it out written in Spanish, that we can't assume because a person speaks the language that they also read the language. And so a lot of times those parents miss out on certain opportunities. So I feel like if we can get more funding so those students can be more involved in things that will help our parental involvement. And that's a big factor at the school level. If we can ever get our parental involvement to be like super high, I think we really see some nice things kind of move and shake within our school grounds. And that's everywhere across the board.
Well, tell Dr. Roy that I would love to talk to him about the RAISE Act funds.
Yes,
how y'all can.
He has worked on curriculum.
Or your principal, or your superintendent.
I will definitely shoot Roy a message and say, hey, somebody would like to hear you talk, because he's been very passionate about a certain project. So I definitely want to connect you two on that, because he's really been pushing for that arts pathway. Like he
Yeah.
feels like, hey, we really need to have this, and really he would be able to discuss kind of some of the difficulties or challenges that he's having as an educator, trying to even teach classes that like he is educated in, because they're
Mhm.
creating different pathways to doing that. So there's always kind of some, I won't say an uphill battle, but the arts being different, it's just, it allows for a lot of open interpretation on stuff sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have a few last minute questions. We went over a few minutes. So this has been a great conversation. I do want to ask you, uh, what advice do you have for teachers or just people in the community that want to advocate but don't feel empowered to do so? Um, what advice would you have for them?
I think the biggest thing is just showing up, just being in the room. Start there. Anybody that has a heart for education, that's already like 12 steps beyond the average person in general. I often tell friends who consider education, this is really hard work at any level. And so, um, for educators, it is tough because a lot of arts educators genuinely have a love for the arts, and some of the other things can make them lose sight of that. So it's always kind of sticking true to, what brought you to the classroom? What is it that you love about that? And let's find a way that way you don't lose that. And when it comes to the community, I feel like we're in a time now, be loud, be proud, and,
Mhm.
and say everything with your chest. Like, what do you have to lose?
Yeah.
What do you, not saying anything is not getting you anywhere. So by saying anything, what are you going to lose? If they
Yeah.
already not doing it, okay, they won't do it some more. Okay. But if you do say something and they've heard you, now you've at least put something out there in the atmosphere for people to think about, or,
Mhm.
on a greater end, do something about it. So I'm
Yeah.
if you haven't learned, I'm very much an overachiever, and I'm very much the speaker of hard conversations a lot of times, but it's necessary.
Well, I think too, I mean, even I kind of hear it from more of like like the state level or like the district level that, legislators will tell me, or like school board members will tell me, or superintendents will tell me, like, no one has told me about this. I mean, I heard
Yeah.
that like in a school district that I live close to, I'm pretty close friends with their school board president, and she's like, I didn't even know that this stuff was like happening, like in a positive way. I didn't even know that we had this in our district. If I knew that we had this in our district, I would have wanted it to be in other schools. And that's something as simple as, like, if you're a parent or you're a teacher, or just like I said, just somebody in the community, you can
Mhm.
go to a school board meeting and you can
Yeah,
talk in a public comment. Anyone can go there, put their name on the list, and they have a couple minutes to talk to directly to school board members about what's happening in their schools. Um, hopefully you want it to be positive. But you don't
exactly.
want to just go there and complain. I mean, you can. That's certainly your prerogative. But even if it's like, hey, like, your school board members may not know every great thing that's happening at Foley High School unless somebody tells
Mhm.
them. And legislators tell me that all the time. Well, I've never heard about anyone in my district saying that this was a need. If they don't hear it, like you said, like if you don't voice it, they're not going to know, and that's not going to be a priority for them.
Right.
So it's really, like you said, getting out there and being that voice, um,
Mhm.
so those people, because they got a million things going on, they got all those competing interests too. So they need to be able to hear, what we feel is important for our students. So yeah. Um, and then the last thing that I kind of wanted to ask you was, that's the advocacy side of it, but how can the community or parents support art programs that are already happening? What would you talked about, you wanted more of a parental engagement in your community. What ways would you like to see communities and parents support art programs more?
Definitely get involved in the PTA. Like, just know what your school has going on with your child. Go to the event. I know, we are a working society, but some of those events that I go to, they should all be sold out with the amount of kids that we have. So, and that's every night. If somebody in the community plus parents plus teachers, these things should all, be selling out. And so definitely having the parents just show up and be present. A lot of these teachers are doing great things in the classroom. Come up to the school and interact with your child's teachers. Don't be afraid to make those connections. We all want to see our students support and flourish in these type of environments. And so I really would say just showing up and being present. Like, we do a lot of family outreach. When those teachers are sending reminds, please acknowledge them. But definitely, like I said, even the small things are really big. So if they're doing a fundraiser, selling popcorn at OWA for it, like, show up and just be in the midst. Because like I said, those band kids for sure, they are going almost, 12 months a year. They have a little break, but they about to come up here and start doing summer band camp.
Yep.
And then last they're gonna be at all of the football games, and it's just that kind of stuff is where it's like we really could use our parents just being present.
Yeah. Well, Sharrell, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your conversation. I appreciate all the participants that have logged on and listened to us and asked some really great questions. Do you have anything else that you want to leave us with tonight?
No, just thank you for the opportunity. I love having these kinds of conversations, and I look forward to us collaborating in the future and having more conversations and getting more people involved in the arts.
Awesome. Yeah. So our next Amplifying the Arts webinar is going to be June 24th at 5 p.m. And actually our community engagement coordinator, Japonica Brown, is going to be leading that webinar for us. We'll off in a conference at the Kennedy Center. So she's going to be leading that one for us, which is a great, exciting first for her. But we hope that everyone joins us again. We're going to have another theater educator actually talking about advocacy and kind of his journey as a teacher. And he's also from the Mobile area. So
I do. We'll chat later.
Yeah. So make sure that you guys join in with us next month. And again, Sharrell, thank you so much for everything. And we appreciate everyone's presence.
Thanks.